it's really surprising that Ian started off with talking about social networks, because that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about, but I'm going to try and bring it to life. So I started off with this exercise, which actually is based on real research, that actually if we thought about it, we could, and I tried it myself. I want to contact the Dalai Lama, and I found one person who I think could get me there. And the research says that 6 degrees of separation to the people we actually want to connect with. So thank you, Ian, for giving us the introduction to that. And Robert again. So this idea of social capital, and this is something that I'm particularly interested in. I'm interested in networks and social capital in my work. I'm going to tell you a bit about what I do in a second. But essentially, what we're looking at here, and this is where I'm really interested, is trust. How do we build trust between people as quickly as possible, and also create networks which aren't just people we know in our circles? And one of Robert's key things about social capital is that there are 2 types. There's bonding capital, which is the sorts of networks we're usually accustomed to, our familiar kind of environments. And we think of things like families or faith groups or cultures. These are bonding capital. And it's very powerful because there's a lot of self-help and cooperation. But what I find particularly interesting is bridging capital. And with bridging capital, what we're doing is we're actually connecting beyond those we're familiar with. And actually, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that bridging culture can actually change lives much faster than bonding capital. And so the key words I'm going to be talking about are trust, reciprocity, and action. And these are part of what Robert Putnam says are the kind of foundations of building social capital. So this is what I do. I run a social enterprise called Mela. Our mission is to bridge cultures, and we do it through the design and the use of public spaces. What that means is we think of places like libraries, which are kind of public buildings, but they're indoor. But we also think of outdoor spaces like public squares or gardens or parks, playgrounds. These are also areas where most people encounter each other. And so we design them to make them more inclusive, but we also ensure that the way they're used also encourages people from different cultures to come together and to mix. And I wrote a book about that. And so this is the idea behind the Bridging Cultures idea, which is that we're building social capital, bridging capital. And so when I work in a place, I'm constantly thinking, how do I connect those bonding capital circles, these little groups, with others outside of their circle? Because the proof or the evidence suggests that our life chances improve, our health and well-being improves, our connection to job opportunities improves, and we actually can achieve a lot more by knowing people outside of our circles. So I'm going to try and put this into a kind of, bring it down to sort of the ground level. And I'm going to choose one particular project that I'm interested in. It's also one of the themes that this project is going to be looking at. And this is called Incredible Edible Todmorden. And it's based up, I think it's Yorkshire. It is Yorkshire. Yes, and what they did was absolutely amazing. The whole kind of ethos behind Incredible Edible is that they actually took over public spaces and they made them edible. They grew plants and I'll show you some photographs in a second, and they actually created a bit of a tourist map so people could actually walk through the market town and experience all of these transformed spaces. And so how did they start building social capital? Well, first they began with a really cool idea that everyone can buy into. And food is a huge connector of people. We all eat. We're all interested in the health benefits of food. Also, culturally, we have so many different types of foods that could connect us and bring interest. So, I mean, choosing something like food was very powerful. And then they began to see, well, what's the win-win for people? How do they bring people in? And of course, there are so many benefits like healthy eating, you know, dealing with issues of food deserts that we have in our cities today. You know, acts of kindness, so sharing and growing food for other people to eat, but also issues around well-being and staying active and getting kids involved in growing. And they began to share these ideas, and in fact, they completely transformed cemeteries. You can actually go to some of the cemeteries in Todmorden and eat there. And of course, in front of the police station, they completely transformed the place in front of that, as well as their local health center. I mean, they really went all out, and as a result of that, they began to do things together. Like every year, they hold this harvest festival where they all, you know, share their activities for the whole year. Then there's reciprocity, and a lot of the food is in public space, so completely accessible to anyone and everyone. And they invite people to grow, take away, you know, pick, so a huge amount of giving. They've also supported local businesses. They started this campaign called Every Egg Matters, and essentially they began to map where people could buy fresh, free-range eggs. And because of this, they started off with 6 farms, and you know, before not too long, it was 64, and all of them, you know, people all began to know where they can get their fresh-range eggs, and created a complete local economy based on just that one thing, creating a whole kind of business network. And then the final thing is this idea of collective action. So you've built trust, you've built reciprocity, and then it's coming together and doing something together. And this is just a few examples of where they grew some space, one outside the train station and along the public spaces. So what I'm going to do is show you not incredible edible Todmorden, but actually another project which is very similar in the States. But what I wanted to show with this video is the cultural diversity dimension as well. So bear with me. I'm going to...
This is just we got one. I know our food is like real because I see us picking up the food here.
I want people to be in touch with the soil because that's where the change comes from. If a kid grows kale, the kid eats kale. If they grow tomatoes, they eat tomatoes because now they have skin in the game. This is the culprit. This is what leads to people needing dialysis. This is the only thing that's offered. You see that it says it's a market, a grocery store, but it's basically, it looks like a glorified liquor store. You know, I mean, these kind of foods are what leads to childhood obesity.